let's just move, give us a slight preview in terms of what you've started to see as you travel around the country, because it feels to me like you're constantly traveling around the country. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing? We're definitely, it feels to me like we're seeing in specific places where you're seeing progressives, the left of the party, the DSA, winning in spot areas, obviously, and talk about that, and also talk about now that we, have basically got all of the federal primaries done, what are Democrats running for Congress? What are they running on?
That part's easy. They're running almost entirely on health care. I mean, it's one of my beefs, frankly, with people who do not. No, you don't need to travel around the country. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time, and maybe you have a dog or a kid you want to take care of. You don't need to keep traveling. If you just watch the ads candidates are putting out there, you can watch them on YouTube or their campaign sites. Democrats are talking all the time about health care, and a little bit about corruption. So, I mean, to the extent Donald Trump comes up, it's Donald Trump and Republicans tried to take away your health care. They tried to screw you if you have a pre-existing condition, et cetera, vote for the Democrat. I mean, there's an ad today that's going around a bit by Alyssa Slotkin, who is not the most left-wing candidate they could have run in this district. It's kind of around Lansing, Michigan. But her 60-second ad is about how her mother had cancer. She understood the importance of health care. She decided to run after Republicans tried to repeal the ACA. And I've seen ads of that flavor everywhere I've gone. And so they'll talk a little bit about holding Trump accountable, but they're a little bit scared of their own shadows here. Don't want to be accused of being the impeachment party. Maybe that's wise, maybe it isn't. What's more striking is that Republicans are kind of running against every Democrat like they're a crazy left-wing Nancy Pelosi clone, or whatever insult you want to use. Something I've noticed, too, is they're running against everybody on Medicare for All, framing it as this Democrat wants Medicare for All, which would kick your grandma off insurance. You know how Trump said the other day,
right?
Your choice between Medicare or socialism. They're doing that more, and they're also doing it to people who are not actually for Medicare for All. I've started to see this against candidates who've explicitly said they want a Medicare public option buy-in, and the ads will say they want to destroy Medicare. So there's a lot more. I mean, which party is more frenzied? I'd say the Republicans are kind of grasping for a message. And one other thing, too, is a constant knock on Democrats is no one knows what their message is. Why are they not talking about this? Well, one, the candidates talk about this all the time. The other thing they talk about a lot is this kind of ridiculous lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act, saying that because the mandate has been undone by one tax bill, the whole law should be destroyed. I say ridiculous. I'm quoting libertarian attorneys. It's a bad lawsuit. They're talking about that all the time too. Maybe not the better deal plan that they have, the collection of policy ideas. Yes, it is not on the lips of everyone in the country. It has not been discussed like the Contract with America, things like that. But Republicans have an agenda called Better Off Now, and I've never heard anybody talk about it. The House Republicans are just completely unable to get people to pay attention to what they're doing in Congress. To the extent, sometimes this creeps up in Paul Ryan's press conferences, where he very sardonically jokes that I'm sure you're all going to cover, and he'll start mentioning some bill that no one's going to write about. Part of that's because, House bills, this tax cut they're trying to pass now, it's basically dead in the Senate. A lot of what they do is not going to pass anywhere. But part of it, they just can't get their stuff covered. So both parties are in a similar position where the stuff they would love everyone to talk about is not really making news. But Democrats are pretty coherently talking about health care. And really, if you just sat down and watched 10 minutes of ads around the country, you'd find every Democrat's talking about that.
Is that just a function of because it's funny in a way, because doesn't seem like there's ever been a more ripe time to talk about corruption and sort of, it just seems counterintuitive. Or is it just that that's so obvious that all those people who are interested in that are already on board? That's not, is the talking about healthcare I mean, what's behind that? I mean, what is your sense of how that's being heard?
I think it is being heard. So people paid a lot of attention when Republicans tried to repeal the ACA,
right?
And it was not entirely clear to people what they're going to replace it with. There's a kind of swagger to how Republicans discuss this that surprises me in some ways. Like in the last day, both Steve Scalise and Paul Ryan have said, if we are elected, we're going to take another run at repealing and replace the ACA. And what follows is often a little bit confusing because it's, we're going to replace it. We're going to, own the libs. Oh, by the way, we're going to save everything about it that you said is that you like freezes conditions and Medicaid. Don't worry about that. We're saving all that, but we're going to repeal it. Nonetheless, like what the quote that matters is we're going to take another run at repealing this. So it's setting up what Democrats are talking about. They're saying unless you want another Congress that will try to repeal the health care bill, please vote for us. And at this point, that's a winning message. I mean, somewhat to their surprise, that has become a winning message.
What's happening in the Senate? I mean, there's a real sense. I get. It seems to me that Mitch McConnell feels like there's a definite possibility they could lose the Senate. I mean, and I don't think he's counting on that, but he's certainly by keeping the session open in October, wanting to ram through as many judges as he could. It strikes me as he thinks that this is he's hedging his bets.
A lot of what he's doing when he says that is kind of sending the alarm to donors. So one dynamic I've seen is that the super PACs designed to help save the House for Republicans have raised a ton of money. The Senate super PAC is not. And that's a reversal of 2014 where Republicans said, oh, the House is fine, but we might be able to take the Senate this year correctly. So I think part of what he's doing is not that I would ever accuse him of being cynical, but that he's saying, hey, if you're rich, we actually need more help than we thought in these races. And that's true. They are worried, though, because they have – it's not false, though. They have polling over the last week. Polling goes back and forth. But, they've seen what it looks like when you're kind of taking command of a race, and that's not been happening recently. And they were hoping by this point, Bill Nelson would be nailed to the wall, and Claire McCaskill would be nailed to the wall, and Joe Manchin, everyone in kind of a Trump state that has, basically the safe Trump states in Florida. I'd say I always divide them between the Obama Trump states, which are totally safe right now for Democrats, and the Romney Trump states, the Montanas and whatnot. And just like they're not in command anywhere, they're doing okay in North Dakota, but not great. They're losing Nevada and Arizona, and they are legitimately worried about Texas and Tennessee. Like maybe they come back to the fold in the end, but those voters just have no recent precedent for actually losing. So, if I can make a tangent, I mean, I see it all the time, and I'll tweet some poll, and the first 5 responses are MAGA folks being like, "Yeah, well, the polls are wrong in 2016." It's just like this extreme, whatever the opposite of Chicken Little is, big chicken large. I guess like we're just they want to say everyone says the sky is falling, and completely not. Shut up, you guys are wrong in 16. They have to deal with that to an extent, but I mean, a big part of it, all these races, it's one of my favorite weird factoids is that Obamacare lawsuit I mentioned. 2 of the Republican Senate candidates in red states are on that lawsuit. Josh Hawley in Missouri, Patrick Morrissey in West Virginia, and they're both dramatically underperforming where they thought they would be. And Democrats will tell you that's the lawsuit. I mean, that's McCaskill and Manchin cannot stop talking about it. It's interesting as a reporter to cover this because, news is stuff that just happened. So it's not new that you go into Missouri 2 months ago and you went there now. McCaskill's still talking about pre-existing conditions. It's not new they're doing that, but it's really been effective. And Republicans cannot really find a way around it because they still want to get rid of the thing.
Did Manchin put out a lawsuit an ad where he shoots the lawsuit a la his...
Yeah.
Did? Wow.
It's funny because the way that... If you've ever seen a legal document, the way they're written, like the first page is like a list of the plaintiffs and the defendants. So in order to make it look more like a what it is, there's a big red stamp on it that says
legal document
anti-healthcare lawsuit.
There you go.
But yeah, he shoots that, and he's like, I hate a cap and trade, I hate this. And that's actually, I mean, Manchin has this way. The Republicans who were honest a year ago would tell you they were more worried about beating him than a lot of guys in bluer states, because he's just a very good politician. And I think that he crystallized in the best way. What's different is, yep, I've killed bad bills when there were Democrats writing them, and I want to kill this bad one that Republicans are writing. And it's the details of the Republican lawsuit and their legislation that are really, really devastating.
Well, so what do you think the chances are of the Democrats taking the Senate at this point?
I'd say, slim, like 10 to 20%. They need to hold their own everywhere. They can afford to lose maybe in North Dakota, but nothing else. And they need to pick up Arizona and Nevada. And that would actually, the Arizona, Nevada, and Texas, that would do it. And that's very hard. I mean, right. Everyone's basically right. After Alabama, what everyone thinks about Doug Jones, it elevated this from totally impossible to 10, 20% chance of happening. And so they feel pretty good. I mean, I'd say Democrats feel better about winning Nevada than they do holding North Dakota. So that if they did both, then they could pull this off. But it's tough. I mean, and a lot of chatter in D.C. is not really tied to anything but people's moods. The Senate stuff is tied to polls. They just were like, by this point in 2014, Democrats were starting to fall apart in a lot of key races, and then there were a few at the end that broke against them. Like at the very end, North Carolina broke against them. Colorado didn't snap back fast enough. They're worried about a couple of those situations where just the candidate did not have his stuff together. Missouri is just fascinating too, because you've got a kind of class of consultants who are around Josh Hawley who are just really snarky and keep trying to make the issue that like Claire McCaskill's husband is rich and she flies around in a plane, which first time I heard that I was like, I don't know, Republican voters seem to be pretty happy with guys who own planes, and where's this going to go? Like they've not really come up. They've also attacked her for like she's voted against the judicial nominees, and the fact that Kavanaugh didn't really blow anybody away makes it easier for her to vote against them. They've not really they just were behaving as if it's still 2016 and you got a 20-point advantage, which I don't think has been the case.
All right, let me ask you about that. How much salience does Kavanaugh have in these things? I mean, are the Democrats? Does Heidi Heitkamp feel like she has to vote for Brett Kavanaugh, and if so, why? I mean, does that come up on the campaign trail?
Yeah, although the irony, if you look at it, is every Democrat who voted for Gorsuch, none of them are immune. It didn't help any of them with an attack. I mean, the advantage they've got is that the Democratic base still wants to organize a turnout for them, because it's alternative between somebody who votes against you 30% and somebody who votes against you 100% of the time.
Right.
But yeah, Heitkamp and Manchin and Donnelly voted for Gorsuch, and Republicans are like, thanks, we're still going to try to beat your ass. So the same thing's going to happen. I think the question's always been if Kavanaugh became so untenable that even Collins and Murkowski vote against him, then they would vote against him. If he's going to be on the court anyway, they're going to say, all right, well, he had 51 votes, now he has 53 or 54. It's just been the way that it's played out. Just Kavanaugh has. I bet if he's at -1 popularity around the country, he's probably at like +5, +6 in Missouri. But he's not like a voting issue. People are not clamoring to vote for people to vote. And there's actually more evidence that people have punished senators for voting for a bad nominee. I mean, Arlen Specter almost losing in 1992 because he voted for Clarence Thomas is a good example. Now, Clarence Thomas became much of a bigger deal than Kavanaugh did.
Right.
But yeah, I don't see it. I'm not trying to hand wave away everything, but it's only a couple of red state senators who already voted for Gorsuch, and so like the sunk cost there is, look, if I go home and say this is the way I vote, president deserves his choice. The guy didn't murder anybody. I voted for him. They think that's going to help them with some voters who are like, well, I like Trump, but she's not trying to dismantle everything he does, so I'm fine. But that's not, I mean, this might be the kind of election we prove that just doesn't matter anymore. Like, you can behave like a compromising candidate unless you're Joe Manchin. You still can't win. It's a big question because it's in the long run. How does anything progressive ever get done again? You need, say 51, 52 Democratic senators. You need to ideally get them by 2021, get them in place. In order to do that, you can't lose the Senate by too much. So that's why
Right.
Schumer gets crap from people, but he's playing the long game. He's like, look, it's whatever it takes for these people to get reelected this year. If you're in a situation after the election where we're down to like 40, 45 Senate seats, then President Warren or whatever next time, she is not going to have anything. We're going to have a Senate that does not vote for any of her judges, which seems like a problem.
Right.
So they're kind of up against the wall. And I guess the degree of sympathy you have for these people, for the Schumers of the world, is if you think that's they're playing the strum string strategy right, great. If you think that they're idiots and they need to be on offense all the time, and that's what voters respect, then you're going to say Schumer's a moron. But he has pretty universal support inside the conference. Everyone kind of agrees that he's doing the right thing.
Oh, is that right? Because I think I'm in that latter camp.
I'm saying within the conference with his own colleagues, they're like, "Yep, just leave these guys alone. Let them maybe vote for Kavanaugh if they need to."
Interesting.
I mean, if you back up a couple steps, the fear at the start of the process was that there'd be a Supreme Court nominee and he'd be popular, and Democrats like even Tammy Baldwin would be under pressure to vote for the guy, and that just didn't happen. I mean, I think the guy's kind of just not that impressive, hasn't captured the country's attention. It has not been a killer issue for Republicans like I thought it might.
All right, lastly, Beto O'Rourke in Texas. What are the chances?
It's still, I'd say like same thing as Senate overall, like a 10-20% chance. I mean, Cruz is again running this kind of goofy campaign. So if you're Cruz, you could say, "Hey, I'm the senator who represents the +10 Trump state. Trump's president. He's doing a good job. Taxes are low, etc." And he's not doing that. He's just trying to disqualify O'Rourke by saying, I think, in his second TV ad about the Pledge of Allegiance, which is not the thing about that issue. It's not clear that it's an issue that moves people. I'm sure they have some polling that says it does, but O'Rourke has been thriving despite it. So Cruz might run a bad enough campaign, and O'Rourke might run a good enough one where it wins. It reminds me a little bit of 2006 Tennessee Senate race with Harold Ford, where he came within 2 points of winning. Very different campaign, very different candidate strategy.
I can't wait until I'm annoyed at Beto O'Rourke for being Evan Bayh, but I guess we'll have to wait for that to happen. Anything else that you think we should know at this point in the race?
No, that's basically it. I mean, I'd say just Republicans are signaling to donors that they're in more panic than they are, but they are worried the way they didn't think they'd be a year ago. They don't feel everything falling away from them, but I'd say the number one reason for paranoia on their side is if you told them we're going to be heading into the election with 4% unemployment and steady economic growth, they would have said, "Oh, okay, well then we're going to hold the House." And the fact that they're currently on track to lose the House with that makes them think everything could fall apart. So that's undergirding a lot of their strategy and their nervousness at the moment.
Interesting. Dave Weigel, thank you so much for coming on. Tell your handlers at the CIA that I appreciate it. Folks can get your newsletter, the trailer. We'll put a link to that in today's podcast description. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Tell that guy you're on a phone call.